Hey, this is Jay.
And this is Chelsea.
Welcome to the Shifting Perceptions podcast.
We are bringing you inspiration to live a more creative lifestyle because our favorite people are the ones that choose the path less traveled. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 15. This is Chelsea Alders.
And this is Jay Alders.
And this week we sat down with Dan Lebowitz, more widely known in the music world as Lebo, and man, is he cool.
This was an amazing episode. Definitely a new favorite. I think we could have talked for another 2 hours, and I still would not have asked him everything I wanted to.
I know. I mean, outside of his just, insane talent, well, we should cover that he is a guitar player, slide guitar player.
Oh, yeah, that's important. Yeah. Who is this guy? For anyone who doesn't know, he's one of the most epic guitarists that I know, and just incredibly talented. He plays the lap steel and lead guitar for ALO, as well as one of the lead singers, Animal Liberation Orchestra.
Yeah, if you haven't heard of them, look them up. They're amazing, but a lot of people might know them because of Zach Gill, who is, in fact, the piano player for Jack Johnson. So there is a lot of association with big names here. We talk a lot about how he just sort of landed in a club and ended up playing with Phil Lesh and Bob Weir and is now often on tour with them and playing with them in Phil's club, right?
I love how, super casual he is. It's, totally no big deal. He's like, yeah, I just play with these guys from, the Grateful Dead, and...
Yeah, I feel like Dan's just an example of one of those guys that was just always meant to be a musician. Literally from the minute he started playing. Well, we learned that from the minute, but from the minute, as soon as he formed a band, he just
so
knew that was a
too.
good fit. Yeah,
it's incredible.
No, it was amazing, and we were lucky enough to sit down with him and his wife about 2 days later after this interview and just get to talk even more. And we'll get Jenna on this podcast eventually.
Yeah, Jenna, you're not getting out of it.
She's his manager and tours with many other bands. We actually, one of the first times we met Jenna was she was on the road with John Mayer. They are just a fascinating couple. They're raising a daughter who is now 9.
Mm-hmm.
In the mix of all of this chaos, they are on tour all the time. So it was really cool just to hear how their lifestyle runs and how everything works just in their daily grind, since it's very, very, very outside the norm. But we fall into a lot of similar pockets with Montessori and Waldorf, and
I loved diving into a creative process. For anyone that's a creative person, a musician, an artist, or even just curious about those expressions, I think you're going to love this, because we dove into some really deep talk on creative process and his approach to guitar playing and music, and his insane story from middle school on, and just the people he's come across and the collaborations that he does it's just all so fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we really do get to sort of touch upon that more collaborative side of music, where it is just a lot about that magic coming together and what can be made when all these amazing talents are in one place. And it seems like Dan really got to fall into that West Coast, San Francisco and Santa Barbara vibe when it came to all that stuff. So I don't know, we're excited to share this one.
All right, cool. So yeah, one thing we didn't mention is I think we first got into the band about a year before we even met them, which was pretty cool. I remember in 2006, you and I were jogging on the boardwalk when we first found their music, and they've been a part of our lives ever since. So this was a really cool interview for us.
Yeah, Maria was always on our top.
Oh, Maria. Yeah.
All right, guys. So I hope you love every minute. Let's jump in.
Peace. Hey, Lebo, what's up, brother man?
Doing good. Just here in Philadelphia right now in a hotel room.
Awesome.
Staring outside at an ice skating rink.
Oh, that's a great part of Philly then. That's awesome.
You're in our on the right coast on our turf. We're stoked about that. We just talked to your wife earlier, and she told us you're going to be in Asbury, and that's our backyard. So I'm we were already excited to talk to you, and then we're finding out that we're going to see you in a day or two. So that's super cool.
Awesome. It's great. Love it. Nice to be on the East Coast with the crisp air.
Yes, very crisp right now.
It's got to be a little crisp back in San Francisco, though, I would imagine.
It is, but it's been rainy, actually, a lot of rain lately, which we need. So I say bring it on.
Yeah. I would love to start the conversation, I guess, at the beginning. So I had the honor and pleasure of being on tour with you and your band ALO, and it was about 11 years and a month ago, actually. Last month it was 11 years ago, so I don't know how the hell that much time flew by. Can you believe it?
It's amazing.
That was before
pre-kids.
Yeah, before there was a collective 4 children between all of us, and before some marriage, well, before our marriage at least. So much has changed, but it's been great to like get to know you and Jenna and like see you create a beautiful little baby Estelle. And you know, it's different phases of life, but it's great to kind of grow together. And I would love, I guess, to start off on that topic. I asked G-Love this during an interview recently. During that tour, there was more than a few of you guys that kind of mentioned that tour and that jam kind of held a special place in all of your hearts. And it was looking back on it from like a musical standpoint and also the standpoint of like Brushfire Records and like the whole scene. It seemed like that was like a special, almost magical time for all of the bands and like the connections between you guys and having so much time off on that tour. There was like only 3 gigs really for like 2 weeks. How do you remember back at that tour? Does it stand out to you or does it all just fade together?
It absolutely stands out. It's funny because, you know, like you get in these conversations about different tours just when I'm talking to other musicians and whatnot. And I've been on so many tours since in between, you know, then and now. I mean, I can't, you know,
I'm
on the road all the time, you know what I mean? But that one is such a standout one. And it's funny, it comes up in conversation. Wouldn't say like all the time, but pretty frequently actually, as far as tours go. It's so unique. And part of it was that whole thing of us just being on that tour, but having time off. Because usually when you're on tour, you know, it's like show. Maybe you get a day off here or there, but it's usually timed with some long travel thing that has to happen, you know. So, and which makes sense because in general, you know, when you're just on a tour, it needs to be efficient, you know, because you got your crew on the road and all this stuff. But that was like so amazing because, right, we do a show, like we did a show in Rio, and we had all these days off to just cruise around and hang out, and they all took such good care of us. I remember we had like that whole floor in that hotel. And we'd all jump on that plane together. The whole kind of entourage ended up taking up a whole plane. So we were just kind of like all together the whole time, just like doing our art and having fun all at the same time. It was a beautiful
do you remember, speaking of plane rides, do you remember on the way home, we almost had the plane taken down because Sonny Aberton got so drunk that I think someone told us the plane almost had to come down in Guantanamo.
Yes, the purser. Yeah, I remember he's like, we're taking this plane down to Guantanamo. We got to get that guy off here.
God.
He was just so drunk. Is that what it was? He was belligerent?
Just very belligerent. It was like 4 a.m. and he was just he wanted to talk to everyone and drink with everyone, and everyone just wanted to sleep. And
yeah, everyone else was like ending their thing to go back home and wanted to like rest up on their way.
And wasn't Jenna like the only girl in that entire crew? Like I remember it was like she was pretty much the female.
I think Dave
she was the mom.
Brogan had his girlfriend there also.
She was there, yeah. She was there too, actually, yeah. That's and so I think she was there the whole time. I feel like they went down like early or something even too, and got a couple extra days there. Did some surfing down there. I really have such fond memories of that run. Yeah, it was just the other day I was talking about. I was telling the story of it because part of it too is it was so unique. You know, like all the tours we're always doing. You know, like I mean, I love doing it, and it's always very exciting to me. Or I probably wouldn't be doing it, but you know, there's somewhat of actually like a routine with touring. In some ways, for me, there's more of a routine on tour than there is at home.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, because in my music life at home, it's like I'm bouncing around between being in the studio or I do lots of gigs with lots of different people. So doing that and then family life. And it's all just kind of like happening. And I feel like in a cool way, I'm just kind of like juggling balls, you know, but when I'm on the road, it's sort of like, you know, you got your travel, your sound check, your show, and your time off in between each of those things. And it's sort of like, it actually becomes sort of in a good way for me, like a good routine.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I remember when we were on the bus with Donovan for a little short tour, his whole band would just be like, get ready for Groundhog Day. This is what it is. Like,
yeah,
and you don't realize.
No, totally. It's actually very routine in its adventure.
Yes.
It's very routine. The only thing that's sort of not is the actual show.
Yes. And you don't actually get to like sort of absorb your atmosphere and like enjoy it the way that Brazil seemed like you had like 2 or 3 days where everyone just got to actually create and hang out in between these like structures, which is funny because we talked to Romeo the other day because he was on this podcast too, who, you know, owner of Alma Surf. And it doesn't sound like it was the most financial smart thing for him to do, but it was like he just wanted this. Like he had this vision of everyone just enjoying their time in Brazil and showing his country to all these amazing musicians. So it was cool to hear from him that he painted this picture and made it happen. And from hearing from all the musicians and artists, it was like it all worked, you know. It was pretty cool to hear.
Totally memorable. Yeah, and that is interesting to hear because it's funny. Back at the time, I wasn't like really even thinking about any of those sides of it. It was just like, wow, this is amazing. But when I think back about it, I mean, to you know, what I was saying about things being quote unquote efficient, you know, keeping the shows happening every day on a normal tour. Yeah, a lot of that's just because of the, you know, days off are really expensive when you got a crew and all that things. And for us to have all had so many days off down there, that's insane.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, so rewinding a little bit, I want to hear about, you know, we've heard bits and pieces through the years, and then I hear stories from you guys, but I want to hear the beginning of all of this. So I know the very formative years of ALO actually started like 7th, 8th grade, correct? And so
exactly.
Can you tell us about how you met those guys? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, we all met. Well, not all of us. I guess it was Steve and Zach and I met in junior high, which is kind of a, you know, I feel like it's a typical time when you hear about musicians, you know, starting their first bands and whatnot. You know, there's something about that age where you're not a little kid anymore, but you're certainly far from an adult, you know?
Yeah, but to start your band that you now still have your band.
Well, that's the unusual part, right? Exactly. That's the unusual part because most all the other musicians I know, they have their first band that they started, and then they did that for a little while and maybe even through high school, and then they all went their separate ways, and that was that. But in our case, yeah, we started a band. We were super into it. I think for me, you know, I don't know how it was for you guys, but at that age it's a strange age because while like you're discovering all this wonder in the world, I know for me that was kind of when I first became like how do you say it? Just kind of like aware of, oh, what am I, you know what I mean, like
the ego and who you want to be,
all that stuff, like what am I doing, you know, and you know, the kind of self-consciousness that can go along with being that age and all that kind of stuff. And music for me just was like, as soon as I discovered that, I was just like, it was like almost like a lifeline in a way. I mean, I make it sound much worse than it was because I had a good time, but it really was. It was like this thick, sturdy rope I could just grab onto and climb up, you know?
Was it like the creative process of like writing the riffs? Was it actually like just the mechanical process of like learning the fluency of like forming the chords? Like what part of that was,
or just like the vision of yourself holding a guitar?
Just
like that
I'm
was
gonna
it.
Get chicks from this. Like what part of it like kept you afloat, like with your lifeline?
I think, you know, it's funny. I think like all those things you said are elements of it, but I think a lot of it is like, you know, like you know, I know for you guys, you relate to this. It's like you have creative force within you, you know, and without an outlet, that force, it's like, where is it to go? It can, you know what I mean? It can be pent up in you, or it can be, you know, just go nowhere. And for me, having music, it was really just something to kind of like gather myself around, you know what I mean? So it's really like all of those things, but definitely I would say a couple aspects was the camaraderie has always been a big part of it. Because for me, when I started playing guitar, it was like I just met Zach and Steve, and we, you know, actually I had a guitar already. It was in the closet, and it was like, you know, let's start a band together. She's like, oh, cool, I got a guitar, I'll play guitar. Zach's like, okay, I got a guitar too. My dad knows some riffs, and we had another friend who actually played keyboards in the beginning. And then Steve, it was so great because he was like, well, I keep seeing those 4-string guitars on MTV. It's like, band probably needs one of those. I should go out and get one of those, huh? We're like, yeah, go do it.
Oh my
so
God.
The whole band really started out of our friendship first, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's actually what I was going to ask is like, you guys, there's no way that these 3 guys just happened to be good at 3 separate instruments and made it happen. Like, that's so cool to hear that it was actually, so then you had to divvy up that guitar eventually.
Yeah. Eventually we did that. Yeah. I mean, eventually we kind of streamlined it because you know how it goes. Like, I mean, it's just kind of amazing that the 3 of us have stayed together with it this long, but we were all 3 of us were pretty serious about it from the get-go. and some of the other guys were maybe a little bit less. So, no fault of theirs. They were just in other stuff, But I really feel like, it gave me a sense of like suddenly we were playing music. It was like something to something that was inspiring. It was an inspiring way to spend your time, right? Going over to each other's houses, working on songs, that kind of stuff. And then when we finally like did a gig, that was like, so nervous for it and everything, but it was like so exhilarating. It went really well. And so that kind of, fueled the fire more, and then we just really all through high school at that point, that was like our thing. We were like, I think it's pretty common, in high school, there's the football players and the this and the that and all, different things. And we were like the musician guys, the rock musicians, not the orchestra musicians, but the rock musicians,
Well, so that's like, I mean, my next question is going back to what you said about creativity. This is really common that like in middle school and high school, we get it out. It's like we're so ready to express it. So people do art and music. Yeah. And I know Jay was like very passionate about his art. But then the problem somewhere happens college-ish and on. And then it's like you get to our ages now, 30, 40, and suddenly we're exploding with it again. It's like you have this thing where it sort of dwindles. So how did you keep it going? And how did you stay in your head of like, no, this is like the most important priority for me?
Well, part of it was having Steve and Zach, the three of us always kind of kept we kept each other focused on it, because if any one of us was drifting out, usually the other two were still, deep in it. So, the thing for us was, by senior year of high school, we'd made a demo cassette, as it would be.
Yes. Is that still existent somewhere? Do we have that?
I heard they're making a comeback.
Yes.
I heard that too, yeah.
Yes. At Target now.
As far as making a CD, like CDs existed, but like you couldn't just like go
record
a CD of your band. Like you had to be like on a big label.
That would be like next level.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's like only for Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But for cassettes, there were like, duplicating houses where you could order, 300 or 500 or whatever. Anyhow, we got that going by our senior year. We were writing songs at that point. Of course, in the very beginning, we were just, playing covers like everyone does. But we started pretty much by our freshman, sophomore year in high school. We started experimenting with originals, and definitely by junior year and senior year, we were full on, writing. And so that first cassette had all original tunes up to that point on it. And then what happened was it was time to go to graduate, and we wanted to go to college. We weren't sure where, and we all applied to a bunch of different places, but UC Santa Barbara was the one place that all three of us got into between the places we applied to where we all got into. So we're like, okay, well, we want to keep our band together. Let's go there. And it's actually our drummer we were playing with at the time too, who, all through that period, who came down there with us. And then once we went to Santa Barbara, about a year into that, he left the band. But
oh my God, this is such an amazing level of like commitment to each other, though. Like I think of myself at that age, and no way.
Yeah, and we were committed to it, the idea of this band. We loved it, and Santa Barbara seemed like a fun place to go too. So we're like, that'll be cool.
Was it like wanting to know where you can take your skills and the music? Like what was like the manifesting aspect of all this? Did you guys have like a dream where you're like, this is going to happen someday, or we can't wait to see if this happens? Like what was on the other side of the door for you guys?
Yeah, I think both those things. We were definitely excited with where it was at the moment, because we were, like I said, we were writing these tunes and performing them and playing and just getting into that whole thing. And then, it just seemed like it just kept getting better and better. So we were like, well, let's just keep riding this train. It's like, let's see where this can go. And we just kind of kept playing. And Santa Barbara was great. Honestly, it's funny because I'd originally thought maybe I wanted to go to more of a music school, like Berklee College of Music or something like that. But Santa Barbara, it turned out to be such a great place from the music department's great there. So I learned a ton in school, but aside from that, just the opportunity to get hours, gigging. There were back then, I don't know how it is now, but back then there were so many, it was a real kind of like, it was a good school, but also had like the party, it was known for its like party thing too.
Yeah.
And as a band, there were like all the parties wanted bands. So a funny story, which is actually, it was pretty funny. This is how we used to get some of our early gigs is Zach and I remember going out. We'd go out on our skateboards on like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We just ride around, and when we'd see someone loading a keg into a house, we'd be like, "Oh, they're having a party. Maybe they want a band." We'd go ask them, "You guys want a band?" Like, "Oh yeah, sure. Come back in an hour. Set up."
Oh my god!
So
Awesome.
and just when you're young like that, you gotta just get your experience with it. So however you get it, you gotta just get up in front of people and get your hours in playing. And I think there's no substitute for that.
You had you had like touched upon how freaking busy you are and like some of the collaborations. I think from talking to you guys in the past and like seeing some other interviews, I think that's in Santa Barbara is where you met Jack Johnson. Speaking of collaborations, is that true?
Yeah, exactly. We were in the dorms together. We all lived in the dorms. Zach, Steve, and I were in San Miguel, and I think he was in I think it was called San Nicolas, which was right across the lawn from ours, like a couple 100 feet or so. so we met him pretty quick because he was in a band. He had his band Soil that he formed down there, and we were both basically first year down there at UCSB. We there were a couple other bands too, but both of our bands would kind of play the same kind of parties in the same clubs and whatnot. So we got to know him kind of right away that way, and it was through music, for sure, through music.
It's like crazy thinking back, like where that dorm room friendship like went, right? Did it have
totally.
any sort of like was there like magic in the air, so to say? Did it feel like, oh, you guys really clicked musically, or was it just like a casual thing that just kind of crept up into where it is now?
It was pretty casual, I would say. We always, we were real focused on our band. I would say, like, it's funny because my musical life now is like, ALO is busy, but I spent easily as much time as I spent with ALO with all these other projects too. Not no single one as much as ALO, but you know what I mean? Like
collectively,
the whole pie is cut into a whole bunch of pieces, basically, of like time. And but back then, we were just like into our band, so there'd be these occasional like jam sessions, but a lot of we were real focused on our band, and Jack was the same way. But his band split up after I don't know, maybe the sophomore year or something, and then he wasn't really in a band for the whole kind of second half of our time at UCSB. But what we would do is we always liked his tunes, and we liked him. We're friends, and we loved his tunes. So we talked to him, and he would come down and sit in at our show sometimes, and we loved having him come up. It was always just a great vibe. So there was kind of an open invitation there that if he was around when we were doing a show, they're like, come on up and do some tunes. So and over the years, we kind of got to know his tunes, and we knew a bunch of covers together, of course, because we were all listening to the same music,
Yeah. Well, so at this point in your career, like when did it officially turn into Animal Liberation Orchestra? Like when did ALO officially form?
So that would have been our last year down there. So we had a bunch of different band names all throughout, growing up, and it's kind of funny because like most people have a band name and they switch members around, and we were like the opposite. We had the same members, Zach and Steve, but switch band names.
Our band name is now such and such.
Yeah, we would just kind of especially when you're young, you're like discovering all this stuff. So like it felt like it would change pretty rapidly. Like we'd get turned on to some new kind of music, and then suddenly 6 months later, the band had kind of a different feel and a different sound. So we would just change the name, be like, oh, let's call it this now because this kind of feels like a new project. But when I look back now, I'm like, probably not, like we didn't need to switch the name, but in our minds, it seemed like that was the thing. And then the thing with ALO, Animal Liberation Orchestra, was it was really like that just happened to be our name at that time, and that's when things sort of, I would say in a way they kind of clicked into what more or less what it is now. I mean, it's evolved a lot, but I'd say that's kind of at the point where it became the basic vibe and the thing that we do.
Okay. So you have any songs there? Like what's the oldest song you play that you're like, oh, I was like in my dorm room when we wrote that? Like, do you have any that you're still playing?
We have a song called Pobrecito.
Yeah, totally.
That's definitely from that period. A bunch of those tunes on our first record are kind of from that. Wasting Time.
Okay.
Is that too? Yeah, those are all. So I should back up. None of the tunes are from our dorm room because we only lived in the dorms our first year. But by our second year, we moved out into a house in Isla Vista, and that's sort of the little kind of college town area that's right next to the school where, you know, a lot of students live and whatnot. And so, but like wasting time, I think that was from like our second or third year down there is when we wrote that. Pobrecito, all those tunes kind of came around then. Yeah, so there's a handful of tunes on that first album.
So it was the three of you guys living together. You guys moved off campus together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a house.
So collectively, like, you guys make pure magic. We've always been fans, but I want to ask you for your solo stuff, like, when did you really start to dig in and tighten this, like you're one of the most talented guitar players. Like, Jay and I watch you in awe. The first time I saw you do the slide guitar, it was like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Like, not only that, I want to dive into like guitar geek stuff soon, but like not only that, and I'm sure you hear all of this, but I'll inflate your head a little bit more. It's like every
for our listeners, they need to take a minute and listen, so we're going to inspire them.
It's like every musician that we mutually know, or people that maybe you don't know that know of you, every time your name is mentioned, it's like you're mentioning the reincarnation of like Jimi Hendrix. It's like, holy shit, Lebo. Like,
those are big shoes to fill.
So like, all right, I guess Chelsea has some question based on that, but I want to dive in.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so like, from your perspective, if you can take a step out of your body and take a step outside of ego, can you, like, I don't know, analytically look at your guitar playing? And I'm not asking you to like toot your own horn, but like just seriously looking at your playing, and how would you describe what makes your playing different? How you approach the instrument different?
You know, it's an interesting question because I feel like you know, there's sort of like different pathways musicians take as to what they and I know this applies to your world of painting and to all sort of forms of art, that there's like the approach of how do I say it? There's a certain element when you're getting everything started where like you got to emulate to just sort of like figure out what it is you do.
Yeah.
But I think some people stay more in that realm, you know. And I've always sort of put stock in the idea of like, you know, it's more important to just kind of find your own path, you know, than stay in that sort of perfection of emulation mode. So, and I think that I was talking to Zach about this the other day. Actually, I feel like that's something that I'm glad that early on that was something of value to us. You know what I mean? Like, so the idea of like not, you know, if you're finding something that's sounding unique to you and feeling unique to you, like that's a great path to go down. I mean, first thing is it has to sound good and be inspiring. But then secondly, if it's unique, then that's a great path to just pursue. So for me with guitar, I've always just sort of, that's been one of my guideposts with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if I ever feel like something's sounding too derivative of someone else, I'll try to turn away from that pretty quick, I think. And not all people do that. And there's a lot of great players that I think are great emulators that are like amazing players, and that's awesome. You know, it's not to say that one thing's better or worse, but just I've always felt like attracted towards something that's a little different. And part of that, even in the guitar I use, I think helps me with that too, because I use an acoustic, but I play it like an electric, and it's just real comfortable for me and inspiring. And I think that's one of the elements of it that inspires me with it. It ends up being like a little bit different vehicle to get down the road in, you know?
So like using, I guess, so I think more in visual terms, even though I attempt to play guitar, like in visual terms, like the emulation, I think is important because it gives you fluency. So whether it's music or art, I think it's a matter of like acquiring a new language. And once you build up your vocabulary, then you have the ability or the choice to like use that vocabulary and speak instead of just copying. And I guess the visual equivalent of that would be like someone learning how to paint and then they just copy other artists, which takes a huge amount of skill, but then to like branch out of that and speak in a different way. And so like from my amateur guitar viewpoint, like when I watch and hear you play, I hear you speaking with the guitar. And like, it's one of the things that I love about not only listening to you guys on, you know, on speakers, but like when I go see you guys play, I'm like trying to like follow the melodies and follow the riffs, and like even on my like novice ears, I really enjoy finding and following the patterns that you guys weave in and out. And I guess I equate it to like my art. Like I like having certain colors flow in and out, and certain lines have like a path that brings your eyes on a journey. And composition from a painting standpoint, I think is probably the same with music, but I don't really understand it as much. So it has like, I don't know, I just hear overflowing patterns and whatnot. I'd love to understand. Can you speak upon that in a way that would make sense to me?
I have some thoughts on that. And just to go back to what you were saying, I mean, I totally see that in your work too. It's just you totally have your thing. I can tell your style. It's like it although even while you do different things with it, it's like your style stays consistent through it. And that's sort of, I mean, I guess that's sort of branching into another subject related, but that's another thing that I kind of like the idea of too. Like I have a lot of other musician friends that I know that are amazing musicians, and they'll be like, okay, I'm gonna do a blues tune, so I got to go grab the blues guitar and I got to play these kind of sounds, now I'm going to playing a jazz thing, so I got to do that, and my approach has always been to like do different kinds of music, but try to just bring a consistency of what I'm hearing in my sound into the different contexts, rather than try to get into a context and become, meld into it, rather just like bring that and add to it,
Yeah.
Which I think is to me. I just find that kind of exciting, But to go back to that other thing you just asked, sometimes I think about that, like to me when I'm doing something on guitar, especially like, a solo, or we're in a sort of improvisational space or any of that kind of stuff. Like I really like the idea of telling a story with it, and it's not like obviously it's not a story with a traditional storybook, like with words and but it's a story. It's a musical story, that has a beginning and middle and an end, and it has tension and it has resolve and all of those things, like and in no sort of formulaic way, but it should have those kinds of elements to it, and one other thing that I've sort of related with this too, that I think sometimes with music and people who play solos or improvisations, I sometimes equate it like with speaking, like a conversation with people, and how like so the two extremes could be licks, they're like licks, guitar licks that we hear and know all these years, and I almost equate those like I don't, not like small talk, but almost kind of like small talk, kind of like when I say, oh, you know what I mean, we're speaking, that's like a lick, and on the other extreme are super heady concepts and going deep into philosophy or whatnot,
right?
And I almost think that, to me, like either extreme is not so great, like
you don't want to talk to the guy that's just on an acid trip all day, but you also don't want the person that's like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, because you sometimes you can have conversations where you're just like, oh, well, that was just a whole bunch of small talk.
Yeah,
it was just a bunch of licks. Oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing good, man. Hey, cool. Hey, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's all these like little licks, and then on the other extreme, you can have a conversation with someone where you're just like, whoa, that was like too deep. So I kind of like the idea of having cool concepts and cool heady things to say on the instrument, but I also like licks too, just like ending a sentence with, you know what I mean. It's a good way to bring the conversation around. So,
and what I love about what you're saying is I think people who don't have a practiced ear, which really is myself, but I've been listening to music my whole life, but I don't play it. But I think when people feel very uncomfortable, they don't realize it's because of maybe that incompleteness of balance, where it's like, that was like I have certain like jam band type of bands that make me incredibly uncomfortable because I feel like they never pulled me in. It was just like dragging on forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, like I'm not into the very like
yeah, right. Yeah, and it's you can really draw these parallels with it. And I think good improvising is telling a musical story, and when that's done well, I think there's there's a communication that'll happen between the musician and the listener.
Well, so is it as easy for you when you're stepping into these other bands as it is with this relationship you have with Steve and Zach that you've had built for 20, 30 some years? Is it like one of those things where it takes you a little while to sew that together with each new band, or you just have the feel from the beginning, or like how does that work with each relationship?
It shakes out all different ways, but generally speaking, for me, like I usually if I'm doing something with someone, some sort of project, they have an idea of what I do, and I have some sort of idea of what they do. So and along with that, a desire to like do that together. So I'd say it's usually all pretty natural. It seems to fall together pretty quickly. Most all the people that I play with are they've got great ears. I'd say that's that's sort of the pervasive thing. There can be all different styles and even different levels of where they're at with their instruments and all that kind of stuff. But I think if someone has like good ears and hears stuff and is responsive in that way, to me, everything just seems to kind of flow real naturally, and that's another big part of it. I think, sometimes musicians, when they're starting out, you go to play music with people and you're busy listening to yourself, and that's just never the thing to do. You know what I mean? The best thing to do is always to listen to everyone else, and then just let yourself respond. Let what you do be a response to that.
Yeah.
And if everyone's doing that, it's all sorts of cool stuff will happen. And you can pick any sort of tune. Like, oh, I wrote this tune and here, like, check it out. And if everyone sort of approaches it that way, all sorts of cool things are going to happen,
So speaking of like your collaborations, I think it would be a crime not to mention some of them. Can you kind of review or list some of the ones that you currently have, and maybe some of the ones that stand out to you that you've had in the past that were just like on the highlight reel of your life?
Yeah, it's interesting because so kind of going back on the timeline a little bit, with going to school down in Santa Barbara. So after we graduated and everything, I knew I wanted to move back to the Bay Area because I was, grew up there and I had a lot of admiration for the music scene that comes from there historically and at that time, when I was getting ready to move up. So this would have been the early 2000s, and just wanted to dig into that scene, especially there's so much good like live based music, live music in the Bay. And especially that time coming from down in Santa Barbara. I loved being in Santa Barbara, but one thing for me was a lot of the like touring bands and things a lot of times they'd kind of skip over it, they'd go either LA in the Bay Area, so I kind of wanted to be in an area where there's a lot of music happening, so it's what's funny about it is that fast forward to the more recent years is I've gotten much more involved with sort of the Grateful Dead scene of music that's in the Bay Area, because they're kind of like the godfathers of the Bay Area music scene,
Yeah.
In so many ways.
Well, that was when we saw you was with Wavy Gravy, so
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a really strong scene in the Bay Area and they're really into live music, and it's just a really cool thing. So somehow over the past few years, I've gotten real involved in that more and doing a lot of stuff with people like Phil Lesh and done some playing with Bob Weir too and whatnot. And just that whole kind of music scene around that. I actually got a show that they just announced today that we're doing at Phil Lesh's club here up in Crossroads.
Wow.
That'll be with Phil. And when it's going to be benefit actually for the fire victims, all that horrible fire stuff that happened, a few weeks ago.
Can I ask you a question on that, Lebo?
Yeah.
So, I understand intellectually at this point in your life, like it's just every day is Groundhog Day. It's like just a day in the life of your job. And I know that at some point everything just, it's a job, right? And you're doing your job, but I want to like understand the different sides of you as far as like, your band is probably referenced to like bands like the Grateful Dead or Fish or other types of bands all the time. And here you are actually playing with guys from the Grateful Dead. And so it's like, how often do you like take a step back from the normalcy of it, of like knowing Phil and Bob and like knowing these people, like as just people, you're sitting out to lunch with them and they burp and you talk and it's like no big deal. Like how often if at all, do you just take a step back and you're like, I'm fucking playing with like Phil Lesh? Like this is like, is this seriously happening?
You know,
like, does that ever? Do you still have the magic?
I so rarely do that. You know, like it's funny. The first time I played with him was with him. Well, actually, the first time we met was it was just a real natural thing. It was actually a gig that Nikki Bloom, you know, Nikki,
Yeah.
she put together, her and Tim put this show together. It was a benefit for it was for, of all things, it was their cat had gotten hurt and they had a big vet bill. This was many years ago, and they were like, they put a benefit together at Terrapin Crossroads for Robbie, their cat. And then since it was Phil's club, he came down, and we ended up chatting for just a second after that. But you know, he was playing with some other people. I didn't know him at that time. He saw me do. I think I did a couple songs with Steve and Dave. Actually, we just did a trio because Zach wasn't in town since he lives in Santa Barbara, you know. And it all went well. It all went well, and then we just started talking. He started calling me up, you know, to come do shows with them, and it was just like a real natural thing, as opposed. And I only say that story as opposed to, I think that some people are like, maybe they're like huge Grateful Dead fans, like, oh, if I could only play with Phil and Bobby, you know, how am I going to get to do that? You know, it's like I never went through that really. It was just like I was on a gig that he was on, and you know, he was like, you want to come do some playing with me? So, you know, it's just all real casual. And I think in general, like a lot of times my favorite things seem to come from that. Usually I find if you put too much pressure on trying to like make some certain thing happen,
yeah,
it's hard to actually make it happen. Whereas I often feel like that, like my job is to just be like, you know, as inside of my craft as I can be, you know, as inside of the art as I can be, you know, like, you know, doing as good a job with that as I can, and ideally good things will come from that. You know?
You still have like an attachment to like the magic from when you were that like 8th grade boy that was like dreaming about being a rock star? Like, are there any like real or hypothetical situations where like there would be that magic left in it, where it's not just a job?
I mean, definitely, yeah. But I mean, for me, like every time I go on stage, there's like, you know, there's magic of like just the waves of sound surrounding you, and you're like, you know, holding on to them and shaping them and pushing them this way and that way, and riding on them and not even pushing them at all, and all the stuff that goes along with it. It's so magical to me that really, like, I think very early on, maybe when I was a little kid, not a little kid, but like when I was first starting, there was definitely that like, oh, if I could go get on a big stage, that'd be so exciting. But pretty quickly, I feel like I got mostly moved by just the actual music itself. And that's kind of, for most of my whole time, that's been the thing that really is the most exciting to me. And I love that because it's so pure. It's so dependable. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Versus all the like, oh, I wish I could have this or do that. All that stuff's sort of like, I feel like that's not really like, you know, it's how do I say, it's not like as real to me because it's so much of it's outside of my control anyhow, you know. And whereas with just like being present for music and playing music on stages with other musicians and even playing alone in a room, like it's all like, to me, it's all just really powerful and inspiring. You know, I sometimes I feel too like, you know, I wonder how this is for you, because as a painter, you know, it's more of you're working alone, I assume.
Yeah,
you
mostly.
know, most of the time. Whereas music, the performing and that part is all like playing together, which I love. But I actually have a real love of just, for lack of a better word, I just call it practicing. You know, and that involves writing or working on something or something I hear to try to like get under my fingers or whatnot. But I really love that sort of alone time aspect of it too, and that's always important for me to have that, as well as all the performing part with the ensemble, you know, and with the group.
Yeah, that's like, well, for starters, let's talk about all the 30-year-old guitar players that just shed a tear when you said it was just so natural to play with the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, no big deal.
It really was, though, because they're just musicians too, and that's
totally,
what I love hanging with Phil. You know, I did a show with him just a couple nights ago, right before I left for the East Coast, and it was cool. It was a show over at Terrapin Crossroads, and it's great. It's just like walk in, talk about some tunes we want to play, and go up there and play them, and we're just all listening to each other, and it's all happening. And one of the tunes I had never played before, and I think I know one of the tunes. I brought one of my tunes, actually, the song "Let It Ride," that's actually on the Brushfire like a holiday album. And I brought that one, and we did, taught that to those guys. We did that one. It's all just like, musicians playing music.
Yeah, well, I feel like that, I mean, that's such a common thread. And also, there's that commonality of performers that the safest and most comfortable place for you is really like on stage. Like that's where
it really is.
exists.
Honestly, like, yeah, that's a really good point. You bring that up because some people would think, oh, it's, you'd be nervous to like get on stage. And sure, there's the excitement of that. But like, honestly, I'm more comfortable on a stage in front of, like one of those stages in Brazil in front of, 30,000-40,000 people often than I am just like hanging out at a party. Like, I mean, I'm comfortable there too, but like I'm more comfortable on that stage.
No, it's funny because Jay gets like before he's like, now that he does so many, like when he's painting on stage in front of these audiences, I'm always like, aren't you stressed out? And he's like, no, once I start painting and none of it matters. Like I'm just up there doing my thing.
Yeah. I always get like really super,
you.
Like when I do like painting with bands or something, I'll get super nervous beforehand. And I've tried different methods. So I've tried like preparing extreme where I come up with a sketch and I figure it all out. And then I've done the opposite where I've just taken a hit and just gone on stage with like no plan whatsoever.
Yeah.
And just both times they come out good, but I find like it doesn't matter if I plan or don't plan. The creativity just is going to steer in whatever way it wants to. And once I just surrender to that, it's more fun, and the anxiety just like melts away. You know what?
You just reminded me of something I have to say really quick when you said the word surrender.
Yeah.
So my friend, I was doing a show. It was up in this beautiful place, Navarro, California. It's in the Redwoods. We do a festival. ALO does a festival there every year called Camp Deep End, which is an awesome festival. It's real family friendly and music and kid stuff. It's awesome. But point being, I saw a friend there who I hadn't seen in some years, and he was standing right in front of the stage, and he was wearing this shirt. And I actually didn't even see my friend. First, I just saw the shirt, and I stared at it, and I loved it so much. It's like one of those, we call it a Venn diagram with like the circles, Yeah.
Right.
And like on the one, it's on the one side, it's like discipline, and the other circle is surrender, and then the intersection is flow. And I was like, I love that, because that, to me, that really encapsulates like how I feel about all this. Whereas like, so the discipline side for me, that's me sitting in the room practicing or working up the songs or the writing or all just the discipline sides of it. And then when I walk onto a stage, it's all about surrender. And then so that it can be in the flow, because any of the extremes, if you're all surrendered and don't have anything to go off of, it could just be a mess. And if you're all disciplined, then the show's not gonna be fun, because it's gonna seem like someone who's like trying to get something over on people. You know what I mean? So, but I feel like a lot of both of those things creates an amazing flow.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I feel like that goes right back to your conversation flow of writing a song and having it be synchronized. Synchronized?
Yeah.
Is a good word?
Yeah.
So I wanted to jump into the family side of it, because I think this is kind of a, I don't know, you guys have really created a beautiful balance with the whole raising kids, being on the road. You have a very special circumstance where Jenna is she managing everything, or it's just ALO, or does she kind of help with all of the separate
She does
projects?
with tons of projects. So she does ALO. She does all the stuff that I do, just, Lebo and Friends and stuff I do under my sort of, for lack of a better term, solo project. Although it's not really solo, because I like to play with other people. But she does that. And then she works with some other bands too, that I play with, like this band that I'm out here with right now called Doobie Decibel. She does the management side stuff for them too. And for us, it's been like awesome. Like you guys, we love to work together. We work well together, So to be able to do work and family and have it all I know for some people that doesn't work. I have other friends where it's like they got to have a real separate thing, or both things suffer. And for me, when they suffer when they're not one thing,
right?
I find
it's easier that's how it is for us too. Like it's easier for us to combine efforts, just because I don't know. I feel like if we were doing this is just how it works for us. But if we were doing both completely separate, it would just be, we would probably never talk to each other.
Yeah, right. Because
This is
you're
our
so
life.
into what the things you, and we're the same way. Both Jen and I were like, we're really into being parents, and we're into the family thing. We're like, that's like top priority for us. But we're also really into the things we do, you know, our passions, music and all her management, all those things, all that stuff we're real passionate about too. So like having it all be one thing for us, just it like, yeah, it's for us, it's awesome because we don't have to like separate it. We can, and it feels like we can just do a lot. We can do a lot of all three of those things,
Well, so I feel like, I'm going to try to get a timeline going. I remember we saw Jenna out here. She was with John Mayer. And then probably 2 years later, maybe, was when you guys had Estelle, because we saw you in Australia. And the reason I bring this up is because she was breastfeeding a baby and I was about to get married. And I remember just sitting there thinking, like, this is amazing. Like, they're still making this work, because you kind of hold your breath at the beginning of that transition, as I know everyone did for us too, where it was like, let's see, are they going to be able to continue this lifestyle? And for me to see you guys doing that and making it work was so inspiring. And so,
that's cool. That makes me so happy.
It was a big moment. I remember seeing her with baby backstage and being like, oh my God, this is doable. But talk a little bit about raising Estelle on the road and how that how has that looked in her life? And is that, you say for you that discipline really works, or have you created this discipline at home and on the road with her? Like, how does that all work for you guys?
Yeah. So it's been so cool because so to kind of go back to like, to the start with it is, Jen and I, we the way we met was through working together. Actually, like she was managing ALO, she was in another relationship, I was in another relationship. This was real early on. She was like our first like manager. But prior to that, it was just me, Zach, and Steve, like looking for contacts to like get a gig somewhere.
I remember skateboarding around college campuses looking for kegs.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. That was our style getting.
Yeah.
So as we got out of school, we were like, okay, this is starting to be more of a thing, or things are kind of getting to be more happening. We need to bring someone on. And we knew Jenna because she worked for the there was this thing called Rainforest Thursday, actually, where some of the very first ALO gigs were under that name, where they would we do these shows at this place down in Isla Vista, and they would raise, all the proceeds would go to help buy acres of rainforest to protect. So we knew her from that because she worked down there. She booked those shows.
Okay.
So we knew her from there, and she moved back to the Bay Area at the same time, and we all started, we brought her into the fold with the band, and we all kind of developed that. And then we just became like best friends, actually. Like we were always just like hanging out. We were like going to shows together, all this kind of stuff. And our other relationships had ended at that point, and we were just like, we were already kind of together so much, you know what I mean? Because we were like working on this band. We had like so many shared interests, and then our relationship really like blossomed out of that. And so I think it's been really cool because there's never was like I wonder if she's going to be into that, or her thinking, I wonder if he's going to be into that. Like we were already like best friends, you know what I mean?
She didn't have to learn the lay of the land for a musician. She already very much knew what she was getting into.
Yeah. I'm like, and I always joke, I'm like the opposite, because my wife's always like trying to book me more gigs, versus other times when people are like, can you come home?
Yeah.
So, but anyhow, she loves to travel too. So right when all the touring started up, we were just, traveling all the time, and with that whole thing. And then at a certain point we decided we wanted to start a family, and have a kid. And our thought was, we're like, well, we just kind of saw the vision of it. Like, we can just kind of keep doing this whole thing as long as it works for our kid, and we're like, that's going to be the first priority. But our thought was like, let's go for it. And it totally worked out. Like, when she was born, she's by, I think, 3 months old was her first tour. It was a Tour de More. ALO does the annual February tour. We call it Tour de More, of the West Coast. And she was 3 months old. And since that was the first one, we were like, well, we don't know how this is going to be, and we don't want to impact the band in a bad way. So we're like, we'll take our own vehicle on this run. So we got our own vehicle, and everything just like went so smooth that by the next tour we were just like all back in the band vehicle together. And it was great for Jenna because she would just keep Estelle in the ergo carrier,
Yeah.
and she'd just be able to like work and breastfeed. And Estelle would wake up and pop her little head out of there and kind of look around with her headphones on. And, there'd be like some crazy rock and roll show going on with a light show. And she'd duck her head back in there and nurse some more and go to sleep. It was like, that was kind of her whole first existence. And then I remember we were out on tour with Jack. We were sharing a bus. It was us and Paula Fuga. We're sharing a bus, and it was so sweet because Estelle took her first steps on that tour bus, rolling down the highway. Of course, I think we were actually at a truck stop at that moment when she took her steps. But it is kind of funny. She learned to walk in a moving vehicle.
Oh my God.
Which is really telling of her childhood.
Really, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I remember Paula was there. She used to sing the nicest lullabies to Estelle. It was so sweet.
Oh my God.
And I've always just sort of thought that that's been a cool thing for Estelle, to be able to just kind of meet all these different people, and it's worked for her. That's the other thing. Like I was saying, we kind of take cues off her in that way. Like, and I don't know that it would necessarily work for every kid, because there's, nature versus nurture. That's like a unknown quantity, you know what I mean? And just what someone's nature is. Estelle's the name of our daughter. She's always, had easy time sleeping. Which I think is one key thing.
Yes.
Yeah, like in no matter what the environment is, I think if that had been hard for me, it would have been harder. But so for whatever the reasons, it's always just worked real well for us. And Jen has always been real comfortable being like a mom on the road. But so what's happened though, this is the thing, is that now Estelle's a little older. And it was like, early on, we just did all the touring, we wanted with her. And then she got into preschool, and we would still pull her out all the time because the preschool was real cool. They were like, more play-based, and they were like...
She was at Waldorf, right, Dan?
Yeah, she's a Waldorf now, but for our preschool, it wasn't a Waldorf.
Oh,
but it was very in line with those types of styles. They were real experience-based and all that kind of stuff. So they were like, oh, go out on tour. Like, you're taking your kid out on tour, like, go. They were happy. Yeah. And then kindergarten started, and it was more like, okay, we'll pull her out here and there. And then first grade, it was like, okay, maybe we'll do a long weekend. And then second grade came around last year, and she like does not like to miss school.
Yeah.
So now she's more been like, because it's funny, I'll try to get her to like miss a Friday here or there, because we can make a longer day of having the family part on the road, But I mean, I kind of love it that she loves school too, so she doesn't want to miss it. So a lot of times what they do is they jump out and join in for the weekends.
Okay.
So we still do a lot of traveling. Like Jenna's actually coming out here. She's going to come out tomorrow. We'll leave Estelle at home just for since she's just going to be out for 2 days. But we kind of mix and match and do all combinations of it, and still spend a lot of time together on the road, which is nice.
It's been pretty cool to like watch you guys, raise Estelle, because you guys had her like a few years before we had before Summer was born, and like I remember we first had Summer. You were kind enough to share some parenting type videos with me, and I think we share a similar parenting style. Like I was wondering, since for me I find that the more I paint and the more connected I am with my visions with my artwork, the more I see that seeping over into other aspects of my life, and I often see methodologies or approaches or like mindsets of painting. Like I always talk about how I like learn my biggest lessons like from in front of the easel. And what I would love to know is like, have you seen a similar thing? Like, are there aspects of being a musician or understanding music or guitar that you, if you took a step back, you see similarities in how you parent, or how that stuff seeps into the rest of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think because our art and all of that should like reflect life, in an ideal way. In its most ideal, there should be these. I like the idea of these universal sorts of things, and one of I think the big ones goes back to just that thing we were talking about earlier about listening. Like often. Well, I talked about it from the musical sense, that I think that like that's always the number one thing as a musician, is just to listen. Like, don't worry about it. Just listen first and foremost. And then what you do will be guided by that. And I think from the parenting perspective, that also follows through too. That a lot of times we have like knee-jerk reactions to things. And oftentimes we just need to like stop and like listen, and not always listen for the sounds. I mean more metaphorically, like listen for the answer, and a lot of times I think that there, somewhat of a clarity comes from that. Again, just because like with parenting, obviously there's so much patience involved. You know what I mean? And
I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And with you guys with 3, right? It's like a whole other level. But like it's funny when you go back to talking about that parenting stuff. I'm actually like really into that kind of stuff. And oddly enough, I also found that some of the stuff there's this child psychologist, Gordon Neufeld. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I think that's the stuff I
that's the videos you sent me.
Yeah, that stuff is amazing for the band dynamics too. Like
for
I can't even tell you like the stuff I've learned from that
awesome.
about just it's just like life lesson on dealing with people, and it's been super good. A lot of those kinds of concepts just for relationship too, of just like listening for what's needed in a given moment, rather than just trying to like impose what your knee-jerk reaction is to put in the situation.
Can I when you're saying that, so what I'm thinking in my head is I'm trying to like take this all in, right? So like as an extreme novice guitar player, I find that one of the more challenging aspects is not necessarily only the notes and the chord structure and all that, but like I feel like a lot of amateur musicians, myself included, really screw up because you forget to leave space in the proper places. Like I think something that you do really well that I've noticed is how you're able to like know when the space is needed that creates that narrative in your music. And I'm as you're describing your parenting, I'm seeing that kind of overlap there as well. Like when to listen and when to give space to Estelle or your wife.
Yeah.
And like
totally. Space is key, right? And a lot of times when we're feeling antsy, we try to fill all the space because you want to do something,
Right.
But a lot of times like just sitting, like assessing for a second is the best thing to do because it sets up whatever it is you're going to do. I feel like that. Yeah, that kind of pervades through the whole thing.
It also it's funny with kids too, because I know with our kids, like when we get like quiet and sort of wait, they sort of start to like they're like, wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. They kind of get it. It's interesting because Estelle has gotten into, she's taking piano lessons now. She's gotten into playing piano.
Oh, that's fun.
And that's been like so fun for me too, as like, just, an activity.
Yeah.
And it's been cool because it's also sort of like it's one of these funny things where like it's fun to see her interest in it, and I think that sort of like setting up the context for that stuff to happen is such a I mean, not to sound too sappy, but it's like a real gift to be able to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it on some levels, even like just setting up the context for anything, So what I do, for example, with her with piano is I never force her to practice. I just don't. I feel like there's too many things you have to do in life, and like music should not be forced. That's just my personal right.
Yeah.
So but what I do is I like to just make it available. So it's like every week after the piano lesson, it's like whatever she's working on, those books just go right on top of the piano. They don't stay in the bag. The piano bench. I like to keep that out, never push it in.
Yeah.
So that it's just like as she's walking by, she can just kind of do it, And it's amazing how often she just walks by the piano and sits down and plays for a little while. And I feel like part of it's just making it like not making it another part of some chore that she has to do or something to kind of make it about me. Like I'd rather just have it be about her. Yeah,
no, I think that's beautiful, and it is with. I feel like that does come back to the Waldorf Montessori method of learning too. Like if you allow that space and that decision making, they'll empower themselves towards not necessarily maybe all the things we want them to do, but they will be doing things that are going to enrich their lives very
exactly.
Deeply.
Totally. Yeah. And that's kind of been my thought too. Like, I don't want to make her do music. Like if she wants to do it, then that's great. Cause when I got into music and the initial thing, my folks back then, and if you go, I should start before we started talking earlier, from 7th grade. I actually first got a guitar in 5th grade, and my folks were real encouraging about it. They were like, yeah, if you want to do it, you can do it. Like they're like, we'll pay for some lessons if you want to go take some lessons. But they're like, if you're not gonna practice and be into it, we're not going to pay for lessons.
Right.
Yeah, you can do what you want, but we're not going to pay for that. And sure enough, I was into it for a few weeks, and the teacher was giving me scales and all these things to work on, and I didn't have anyone else to do with, so it was just kind of me alone doing that. I didn't have any sort of way to apply it to my life, so I actually dropped it, and that's how the guitar ended up in my closet. Fast forward 2 years to 7th grade when I met Zach and Steve, and we were having this great friendship and good times, and suddenly we wanted to do a band. That suddenly the music had a context for me. It was in a friendship already, so I was I got that guitar, I'm ready to start up again, and never put it down.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, so one of the things that, and I know Jay and I always get on tangents with Zach about this too, but one of the things that I truly think sets ALO apart is your continued education for yourselves. And I know that that comes from just playing together, but just you both have sort of an obsessive nature to get better. Watching your talent, every single time we could skip a year and then see you, and it's you've all grown exponentially in different directions. I know Zach's working on his voice a lot lately, and I know you're always improving in many directions. So what is it that you find the most fulfillment with right now? What is the thing that you're just obsessive over?
Well, okay. So, one thing, I love to practice. I love practicing my instrument. I love all that stuff. And sometimes I think that actually what it's almost like a backwards thing where it's so grounding to me to sit down with my instrument that I almost in a weird way feel like the quote unquote getting better or whatever it is, rather than that's not actually why I sit down. I sit down just because I want to do it. And the getting better is just the sort of that's the byproduct of it.
Right.
Oddly
your 1,000
enough.
hours.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know specifically at this very moment. It's funny because I have a little mobile recording rig set up in my hotel room right now, and I'm working on some steel guitar tracks for a singer-songwriter from the Bay Area. And I've just been on my off time here, in the afternoon. I've just been sitting here working on these tracks, and I'll send them off. So I do. It's kind of amazing to be able to be doing studio sessions in a hotel room in Philadelphia, but here we are. Welcome to 2018.
I was gonna say a long road from your cassette tape.
Exactly.
Recordings.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm doing and bouncing between that. So I was working on these steel guitar tracks. I started my morning out with that, and then I hopped on the phone with Zach because we're working on some new ALO music right now, and we all demoed out different tunes, and I was working on some that Zach started last week right before I left, and now he's at his studio working on some of my tunes. We're all just we basically work up versions of our tunes in our home studios and then send them to each other to have each other add to them and stuff. So we're sort of in the middle of an ALO recording right now as well. And then beyond all that, getting back to just I love the idea. Last night I got back from the gig, and one thing, this is one of the greatest things I think for any musician. I bet this applies to painting as well. Is that, and it goes along with what I was saying about Estelle's piano thing. Having the stuff out is a key way to get better, because a guitar sitting in the case will probably stay in the case.
Right.
So one thing I like to do is I always, the amps and everything go off with the crew, but I always take my guitar with me. And first thing I do when I get in the hotel room is just open the case and take the guitar out, even if I'm just going to go lie down and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Because then the guitar being out, I'm just that much more likely to just grab, put my hands around it and start using it,
Yeah, even if it's just a fidgety type thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it's funny. You're you think, oh, I'm just gonna pick it up for a second, and sometimes a whole hour goes by, and you got all this stuff out of that hour that otherwise would have been, maybe I would have gone down to the, just gone and got some coffee or what, you know what I mean? It's
you would have ended up on Netflix. Yeah,
totally, exactly. So I was sure with art, it's the same way, right? Having your canvases out and your paints out is such a great way to capture the inspiration, because a lot of times you get inspired, I know, with music, and it'll be oh, if I got to go downstairs to the garage and get the guitar out of the case, but I get totally distracted in between those two steps, it doesn't happen.
My version of that is, so a lot of times I get sucked into the business side of stuff, because I'm running every aspect, the marketing, the website, all of it, and a lot of times it's extremely easy to just push aside the creative stuff. So when I feel myself doing that, recently the most recent painting that I did, it was this 5 foot wide canvas, and I just set up this giant intimidating looking blank canvas on the easel behind my computer desk to just like stare at me. And like every day I'd walk in and like look at it and it'd be like, "Hey Jay, what's up?" And I'd
Yeah,
it's
the
like
same kind of thing. And then I'm sure when the moment presented itself there, what you were like ready to seize that moment.
Yeah, it got to the moment where I was like so sick of looking at the blank canvas and I felt like such a loser for not painting it. I was like, all right, screw this. I just grabbed some brushes and like started painting just because it was like right there.
That is a huge thing you bring up, though, that I think artists deal with, and maybe I feel like almost more so in our modern sort of not society, but the modern take on promotion and all that thing with all these cool tools we have, like social media and all those kinds of things. They're like there's so much in the artist's hands to be able to promote, but at the same time, it can be very distracting from actually just creating. Sometimes I romanticize about the 70s musicians who didn't even have cell phones or whatever.
Yes.
It's just like
we're watching
just like play music.
We're watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. We're totally obsessed right now. If you haven't watched it, you should watch it. But an episode last night, she was watching this artist, or she's like obsessed with this artist. And I was asking Jay, like, don't you wish it was those days where he just paints in a hidden loft somewhere?
Yeah,
and then the only time
I know there's something beautiful about that. Whereas now it's like all about, okay, quick, gotta go grab the phone, gotta go film this thing I'm working on.
Live stream it. I know.
And it's like, and suddenly you're not working on the thing anymore because you're basically like looking for your phone, and then suddenly you get a notification about something, and then time. Yeah,
2 hours later, you still haven't painted anything. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so I have a theory about that too. I feel like because of the resource online, like. For someone who is learning an instrument, I mean, with the information that's on YouTube and stuff, it's like, things that like when I was a kid, I would have to, if I was trying to learn something, I'd have to search out, my guitar teacher. If he didn't know it, I could go find some guitar magazines, maybe see if there was something in there, but it was just kind of endless. Yeah. There was a lot of mystery. Now you can just type it in online and there's all this amazing instructional material. Yeah.
I had my parents got me a guitar when I was probably like in first grade or something like that because I wanted to play so bad. I used to go through my dad's like vinyl collection. I'd like listen to like Zeppelin tracks or Beatles like over and over, and I like wanted to play so bad. And they got me a guitar for like my birthday or Hanukkah or something like that. And it was like before all this stuff. So I went to class like once a week, and I think the guitar, like the action was just really screwed up, and I didn't have any kind of electric tuner by any means. I remember having like, I think it was like a cheap plastic 45 album that was like the notes that you had to tune it by ear.
Totally.
And like it was like such an obstacle that I just didn't stick with it, and I'm so mad at myself for not sticking with it. But it was like you had to tune it by ear. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like 7 or whatever.
Totally. Yeah, there were a lot of obstacles. So the funny thing that I think now though is I was thinking myself, I was like, okay, you're right. There's so much resource, but I feel like in a way the people the youngsters that are going to really rise out of it are those that have distraction management skills.
Yeah.
Because like I was saying, it's kind of like we were talking about a minute ago, you go to learn the thing, you type it in online and there it is. But then suddenly there's that sidebar with all these other things you could click on too and just suddenly get in some rabbit hole and not actually do it. Like, I feel like along with all the information and resource we have, the distractions are so much higher than when we were kids. So like I really feel like that's like the winning combination. like I think that's what kids need to learn about maybe more than anything is how to like manage distraction.
Yeah. You need that like obsessive personality towards like one goal, and otherwise it's too much.
Yeah, because you can be pulled so many ways now, and we're so available, like the fact that we can even do this right now, it's amazing and efficient,
I want to dive back in.
Sides to it.
I need to like dive back into creative process because that's like a topic that like endlessly fascinates me. And like, so speaking of like, we were talking earlier about like building like a vocabulary and fluency with your craft, and clearly, you gained fluency at a really early age, right? And I'm sure like the learning curve has changed over the years, but like for me with my painting, that's the only way I can compare it because that's how my brain works. So with my painting, I'm constantly finding myself that when I get too comfortable with a technique or with a certain subject matter, whatever it might be, that I find myself like pushing myself more and more in a direction that's really uncomfortable to keep that like that hunger, because I don't want to stay in a place that I'm too comfortable in. I don't want to fall into like a rut of like, here's my here's my protocol of how I paint. Like I'm always pushing.
Yes.
And like
yeah.
So like my flow, like I'm in flow when I'm painting, but then I find by doing that I'm constantly slipping out of it. So my process often involves like being totally in flow and then falling out of it and then spending 3 hours trying to find it again and then getting it and then trying to grab the steering wheel and be like, I'm a genius, I can do everything. And then all of a sudden, like as soon as you grab the steering wheel, it's like, oh crap, I just drove off a cliff, I suck.
Yeah.
It's like, is that at all what it's like for you, or is it more?
I definitely go through all those things.
I don't picture that. I picture you just being like, I can play anything I want. Like
no, absolutely. I'm always working on things I can't do, and I'm real aware of things that I want to be able to do. And
what are those things?
And well, does this relate to your art too? I don't know, but I once, when it was actually one of my teachers down at UCSB, one of my music teachers. I remember he said something cool. He ran the jazz department down there, and he was talking about, like we need our technique, but he's like, hopefully your ear is always ahead of what you can do. And when I say ear, I mean like ideas. And then for you, I guess that would be like your eyes, are like beyond what you can do, because that's sort of what can pull you towards getting something new and getting something better and being inspired, because I feel like there are musicians where like their hands and skill level might be past their ideas, and that's kind of I think that's not a good place to be, so for me, what I'm find keeps me engaged with it is really the very first thing that was there even before I played guitar, which again goes back to listening, but just listening to music. Like, it's so funny. I know so many musicians who just listen to talk radio and they're like, oh, I don't write as many songs as I did a few years ago. And it's like, to me, it's like, yeah, like listening to music is so inspiring to just listen to music. So I listen to a lot of music. I have a lot of different ways I do it. I have all my stuff I've loaded on my phone. I've got Spotify. I do Sirius XM. I got my favorite stations there and stuff. And I'm like, and I love looking for new music too. That's another thing. There's, you could stay pre-1972 and literally stay inspired all day long for the rest of your life, probably, but there's all this other new stuff that's came out yesterday, and came out in 1986 and came out in God knows when, so it's like, I love finding out about new music and I love just listening to it. And I often find that the more music I listen to, the more inspired I am about music.
Well, so I know you guys are so involved in the Bay Area scene right now. So what are the biggest bands that you guys are like, whoa, they're just like killing it, that are coming out of that area?
There's some, it's interesting you should say that because I'm in the Bay Area scene as far as, where I live and everything. But as far as like the music scene in general, there's a lot of, I don't feel like it's just Bay Area as much of it is sort of a scene of music, Yeah. But like some friends of ours, like, do you know that band Fruition?
Nope.
Don't think
they're
so.
A great new younger band and they're awesome.
Yeah.
They sound great.
Fruition.
Yeah. Keep an eye out for them. They're really good. I think they actually may have opened for Jack on it. They did open for Jack on a couple shows.
Okay.
This past summer, but just a couple. I think there were some shows in Texas, but they're some friends and they're a new band that just sounds great. And they just put out a new album not too long ago.
All right. We'll have to check that
sounds
one out.
awesome. So
and where are they out of?
They're based out of, they're kind of spread around right now. They're based out of Portland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But they're a great young band that I would say it's worth checking out. And then the Bay just has tons of, it's hard to put on. I feel like a lot of my relationship with Bay Area too right now is this, part of what's cool about the scene is there's all these bands, but there's also just all these musicians. And one of the cool things that happens at Terrapin Crossroads, which is Phil Lesh's place, is there's multiple performance spaces there. There's the main room, they call it the great room, and that's where, like the ticketed concerts happen and all that kind of stuff. There's an outdoor area that holds probably, I don't know, like 1,500 people. That's like a whole outdoor area for music too. But the real heart of the place is the bar, which is the bar restaurant, and that's there 7 nights a week. And there's at least one group in there every night, and on the weekends there's 2 to 3, starting from afternoon on into the nighttime. And what's so cool is they mostly don't book bands. What they do is they book musicians.
Okay.
to get together, and then everyone just kind of, sometimes they get a thread going beforehand, but a lot of times you just show up, an hour and a half before your set, and you chart out, some of your tunes or some covers you want to do or some tunes you've written, and you hand out the charts to the other players, and everyone kind of hands charts to each other, or just talks through the songs. Sometimes you chart or anything.
Yeah.
And it's such a fertile creative space to just like try stuff out, and I love the whole scene there, because they've really kind of encouraged it by doing it that way, by instead of booking bands, like just booking musicians to sort of try things out together.
Yeah, so I feel like
really
that's really
cool.
unique to that area. And I mean, it's been 10 years since we were out there, and I feel like even
you're overdue for the return.
Yeah.
I know it's the goal for this year, actually.
Yeah.
But that's something really unique. We live in this area here. I mean, we have New York and we have Philly, but Asbury Park in general has really blown up as far as like its own little music scene. But I feel like the collaboration element is something very unique to that Northwest area. I do feel like that's when you meet musicians from that area, they are very ready to just jump into any circumstance.
Yeah, it is a thing. I think that it's something that maybe that's part of what drew me to the area in the first place too. I mean, I grew up there, but when I moved back, as an adult, from Santa Barbara, I think that was part of the thing that drew me in, was just knowing that whole kind of that culture of music. Yeah, like trying things out.
Yeah, there's some serious magic in that. I don't know what the art equivalent is to that, but I feel like we don't really see that a lot in art community. I guess the surf artists really do pull together in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That whole thing is really based around like collaborative, which lends itself to, rock and roll music or folk music, because it's people playing their songs together. You know what I mean?
I would love to know if there's any stories behind some of your songs that like stand out. Like when I'm doing like an art show, as like a for instance for my world, there's when I'm showing people around at my different paintings, a lot of times there's a few that kind of stand out because either the process of how it happened, or the inspiration behind it, or like something has this really cool story that when I have an opportunity to share it with people, it's kind of fun. Are there stories that stand out to you that might be really interesting for people to hear about, like how the song came about, or where the inspiration came from, or something like that?
Yeah, there's one that just popped into my mind because I just played it at a show last night. And someone came up to me after the show and was asking about it. And it's a song that's on an ALO record too, but I do it in ALO plays it live sometimes, but I also do it with other groups, and did it with this group that was playing last night. It's called "I Want to Feel It," and I remember that was a moment where I was just feeling like I had a whole bunch of obstacles. This was, I wrote a few years back, and there were a bunch of obstacles in my way, and I was like, just kind of like doing this dance around the obstacles, And suddenly I had like a moment of clarity. The song, the starting words of the song is, if there's a storm coming on, I want to feel it. I won't go run and hide. I stand up to my pride. I want to feel it. And it was a real moment of clarity, and it got me right through the obstacles. Yeah, just this idea of like, okay, no, I got to just like look at these and acknowledge them and move right through them. I can't just like dance around them anymore.
Surrender.
And yeah, totally. And kind of a combination, right? To the discipline to like force yourself to do it. Force yourself to surrender. That's kind of an odd.
That's true,
odd set of words, but it makes sense, right? Like sometimes you got to force yourself to surrender.
Yes.
And I found it's interesting when I sing that song, like last night, I noticed that people come up after the show sometimes and just relate to it in a way, because I think that's one of those kind of universal things that no matter what we do for work or for life or what culture we're from, we're all sort of experiencing that same thing together. And that's a big part of life, is like getting through the obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I have one last question, and then I think we're starting to wrap it up a little bit.
I have like one or two
there.
more if
All right.
Dan doesn't mind.
I got
just
time.
like a total tangent, but I want to hear.
I love your tangents.
I know, but I just feel like there's a hole in the story as far as like with the Zach's relationship outside of you guys with Jack, because he obviously was very involved with ALO. So then was that a group decision with you guys, or did he just start playing? Like, how did that happen?
It's one of those, that's a really interesting thing you bring up. And I think we almost started talking about that a little bit ago, but got on another tangent.
Yeah.
But that is an interesting thing because, we all, so we all went to school together and we played together and that kind of stuff. And then we, moved up to the Bay Area, and were just focused on our band there for a couple of years, and then suddenly Jack started kind of doing his thing more and put out his first record and all that kind of stuff, and then Zach joined in the band, I think, after the second one, so it was maybe when the third one was happening.
I didn't know that. Okay, he wasn't on the first.
Third, it was after the third one, actually. I think he did some playing on it, but then he actually joined the band at that point.
Okay.
And before it'd be like, sitting here and there. And it was a moment because at first it was a hard thing because we'd all just been focused around ALO, and that was before. Well, Zach had a kid at that point.
Yeah.
But none of us did too. So basically we were able to sort of just, base our lives around whatever, ALO needed. And suddenly when that came into place, it was like, there was this other thing because Jack has such a huge thing up and running at that point. And
his schedule was probably crazy.
Yeah, he was touring a lot more back then than he does now too. So it was like a lot of dates and all that kind of stuff. And so we had to work around it. And it's an interesting thing because at first it's a good example of that where it presented itself as a hardship. It's like, oh no, now we got to like figure this out. But to me, it became like the biggest blessing because I think if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been put in a situation where suddenly I had this, this sort of opening of time, but still had all that creative interest and energy,
Right.
So I just started like getting into all these things and playing with all these different people. And now it's really a defining thing for me, I feel like, is this idea that I play with lots of different people and do lots of different things. And for me, it's something that I feel really fortunate to have because I think for myself, and I think this is a thing that can happen to a lot of, musicians and artists who are just focused around one thing all the time, is that it can get sort of, you can lose the inspiration a little bit if you're just like doing this one thing and trying to get everything out of one thing. And so for me, that sort of forced me into a position of like doing more sort of varied things that in turn ended up opening up all these opportunities and like things like playing gigs with Phil Lesh and all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily think I would ever be doing any of those kinds of things, that I'm now doing or on this tour that I'm on right now here on the East Coast,
Right.
All that sort of stemmed out of that opening of space, and it's turned out to be this really healthy thing for ALO because since we're all like that, again, if you go back to the Venn diagram kind of thing, if you think of my and Steve's and Zach's like musical interests as individuals, there's a lot of crossover, but it's definitely not all crossover. Like our circles don't line up exactly. We all have these other areas outside of it. And I part of the reason I think ALO is able to exist so well now is because we don't force it so that like we got to get all of our creative needs met through ALO, and that way it allows ALO to just be the intersection of our interests and be pure to that, and we're not forcing we definitely tug on each other here and there, but it's not. I think it would break it if we all had to get all of our things out of ALO.
Yeah.
No, I love it. It's like a marriage where it's like you have to allow like. If I told Jay he couldn't be an artist if he was married to me, it's like finding that balance of relationship and fulfillment. It makes so much sense.
Yeah, it actually makes us stronger. And I think ALO is so much stronger because of it, because we all are doing all these other things and getting inspired in all these ways. And then when we bring it in, like I said, I was on the phone with Zach just before talking to you guys, and we were talking about this new tune we're working on, and we were all real excited about it. And inevitably, our outside influences are going to make their way into that song. Rather than just being a totally insular only, ALO thing, and it's cool. It's cool. Keeps it exciting.
Talking about all these like topics, I'm imagining like being a fly on the wall, like back when all of these different branches of like the tree were started to grow. Like, I don't know what order everything came in, but it like when the whole like Jack just started like blowing up with his career, and then like you guys started doing your thing, and then G Love, like everything happened, within a few years, like different timelines. But like, what were like, if I was a fly on the wall in those conversations, like, was there ever moments that you could talk about where there was any like ego in the way, where you're like, well, why aren't we blowing up that big, or how come, like anything like that, like just a normal human reaction, even if it didn't last for more than a minute, like, because like, I don't know how else to say it, but like when I hear you guys play or when I listen to your music, I'm always like, well, why the fuck aren't they like huge? like I feel like
he
you guys
literally actually says that every single time.
Literally every time. Yeah. I'm like, you guys should be like on every radio. Like when someone says like, and I mention your band and someone's like, oh, I don't know them. I'm like, seriously, dude, like you don't know who they
right.
are. Like, so I don't know if you're comfortable talking about that, but were there any like ego moments, even if they lasted briefly during that stuff?
I mean, I'm sure it's like there'll be moments. There's like fleeting moments of it, but I tend to not. I don't like to really. How do I say it? Whenever I feel like that, if I do have those feelings, my reaction is more to be like, you know, well, what can I work on right now in this moment that brings me back to being in an inspired state. And I will say the thing with Jack was never too weird in that, because we were friends, you know, he was always, he's been so cool to us. Like, you know, like being on his record label and putting our albums out and taking us around the world on tours with him and always like promoting us wherever he can. And so like, you know, like it's I would say the probably the hardest moment would have been right when Zach joined. At first, when he joined, you know, he was just doing a few shows here and there and he could kind of come and go. And then suddenly it became a thing where he became more a member of the band, you know, where, you know, like it was, you know, as things go like that, when you spend more time with it, suddenly you like, oh, well, they're going to notice if it's gone. You know what I mean? And it would be like that moment we were talking about a minute ago where we had to sort of like reconfigure a little bit. And that was a hard moment. I'll be honest with you, because at that time we were just like all focused on ALO at that point. And it was like, okay, well, you know, do that. And so that was a hard moment to do, but it was never, I can't say I ever had like feelings of like, oh, you know, I wish, you know, that was us, you know, or not. I don't know. I feel like that's, I don't, you know, it's an interesting question because I don't like to go there, but I'm not sure if it's that I don't naturally go there, or if I just don't let myself go there, you know, like, so I just saw the Mr. Rogers movie.
Oh,
you know?
we have to watch that.
We have it in our queue.
It's so right good. Now. I like cried the whole time and was like I was so inspired. I saw it on a plane actually. But I remember one thing he was talking about, and I can't remember the exact context of it, but he was talking about, it was kind of later in the movie, and they were, you know, they built up all these beautiful things and all this stuff, and then they were kind of talking about these same things we're talking about now, like the hard moments, you know, and I remember he said something about it. I can't remember if he said his mom told him or if it was just something he had thought of, but like, you know, he's like when something goes wrong or there's like a hard thing, he's like, I always look to go look for the people that are helping, and that's who I try to go towards.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of think that sometimes even you can even apply that within your own brain, you know, like when there's a problem, like I go to the part of my brain that looks like it's the side that wants to help, not the side that wants to sulk, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I usually try to just like find that guy in my brain and go hang out with him instead, you know, and go work on something. And usually cool shit comes from it. Like I said, that song, I Want to Feel It directly. It wasn't from that particular time we're talking about, but just some other obstacle in life kind of time. Like a lot of times that's when cool creative things happen, you know?
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Like how I know, like G-Love, like Garrett gave Jack some early opportunities, and then you guys were around first, and then Jack blew up and kind of took you guys along for his ride. And it is really cool from like an outside perspective how like the dynamics and the friendships all carried through, and
they really have. And Jack's been so cool about all that stuff. I'll say because you know I know he's aware of that. Like early on when he was needing Zach to do those shows and stuff, that was potentially going to take time away from ALO, but then he'd just be like, hey, actually, like you guys would be a great vibe to start off the show anyhow. So like you guys should come out, you know, and then I always have a good time sitting in with him and playing steel guitar and all that kind of stuff too. So it's always been a real, you know, the positivity has so far outweighed the negativity, you know, in terms of like elements.
I feel like all of you kind of sing about, you know, that positive side and the upbeat at ALO, Jack, you know, even G-Love. Like, I feel like there's always that like upbeat side. And you know how they say, like, once you meet people that you're fans of, like, it's almost like safer not to meet them because they'll disappoint you. Like, I've always sort of felt the opposite about all of you guys.
You're right. Yeah, it's totally the opposite, you know, and I totally know what on our drive back from the gig last night, we were having that same conversation because people were sharing stories of like, you know, people they had met over the years that they look up to that just were like, oh, I wish I'd never met that person. It kind of ruined it. You know? But this is a great example of the opposite. There's such a cool mutual respect and a good, like, it's just been great and all that. And Brushfire has been so cool too, for us just from that whole community, because like, you know, meeting folks like Donovan and G Love and everything. For us, like actually Steve and I and our friend Ben, who's the drummer of this band, the California Honey Drops, we just did a show with G Love, where we were his band for a show out in Monterey just a couple weeks ago. It was a ton of fun, and all that in a way just comes out of the whole Brushfire relationship, you know?
That's so cool.
Oh, I should add that, by the way.
Yeah.
When you were asking about some other bands, you know, I'd mentioned that band Fruition. I got some friends in this band called California Honey Drops. They're a great Bay Area band.
Okay.
That's kind of getting their thing going now. Yeah, check them out. California Honey Drops. They're really cool.
Before Chelsea asks her one of her famous questions, I have to yet again jump back to creative stuff. So like you had touched upon and like kind of teased some of your process, saying that, kind of affirming that, yeah, it's not always easy for me, and I'm still pushing myself, and I'm still, you know, trying things that are hard, but you didn't give me the rest of it. So what exactly, be as specific as you want, because I'm sure there's, you know, guitar nerds way more into it, you know, more knowledgeable than I would be from understanding what you're about to say. But like, so get as nerdy as you want, but like, what things are you trying to work on that you don't have yet?
Yeah. So one of the things when I was talking about listening to music, you know, I like a lot of jazz. I listen to a lot of jazz music, you know.
Same. Yeah.
Kind of from all eras, but I love, you know, especially classic bebop and hard bop and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times I'll be like, you know, whatever, driving around or just in my house or whatever, I'm listening to music, and usually there'll be these moments that spark out that just like really cool passages that happen, you know, like in an improvisation or in a head or something. And so I have all these screenshots on my phone where I take a screenshot of whatever the track is, or if I'm in the car, I take a screenshot of the little radio display, or not a screenshot, a picture in that case, you know.
Yeah.
And I save these, and then I'm constantly going to those, you know, and it's like a song title, and usually oftentimes if it's something I'm listening to through Spotify or you know, through my iTunes or anything like that, I actually have like a spot, like the time in the song, right? Like, at a minute and 30 seconds, you know. And I go over there and I listen back to it, and then I just sit down with my instrument and try to, like, I sort of do it on levels where, like, there's the level of just, okay, what notes were those, and like getting those under my finger. But then often I find the real magic is a layer deeper than that, you know, like the essence of what's happening and the energy behind it. And then I try to capture that. And then what I do is, going on with the thing of not just copying, I really don't like to stop there. So like, then what I like to do is, once I kind of have it done, I sort of let that go, but then I play with the idea, you know what I mean? And just mess with the idea and kind of just start playing stuff myself, like improvising, but sort of, referencing the idea, you know, referencing notes of it, or referencing the energy, or referencing the rhythmic flow of it, or all these things. And it's the kind of thing for me that I can just get completely lost in. And it's amazing. One little like 10-second idea or 5-second idea can literally be like a week. It can be a month's worth of work just messing around with that idea sometimes. I'll just keep coming back to, I'll be sitting in a hotel room, I'll come back to that idea and just kind of mess around with it. And so it really does involve all sides of it, from often technique, like something that I literally can't do. Like when I first hear it, I was like, that's a saxophone doing that thing. How am I going to, like... So
you're saying you like physically can't manipulate your fingers in that way?
It often starts as like just a physical thing to try to kind of get it under my fingers. But then, like I say, I don't like to stop there. I like to like get beyond that, because a lot of times it's not the physical thing that grabbed me in the first place. It was more the, you know, the other layers of it.
Yeah.
So and I just loved kind of digging into all that stuff. And for me, that's kind of something I've been doing since I was in college. Like that very thing, just like hearing ideas. And another cool practice thing that I really like to do is it's kind of counterintuitive a little bit, but it actually works really well, is practicing without my guitar in my hand. Whoa, because sometimes your instrument can't, so this is weird, but like I could be in the car and I could hear something and I could just listen to it and then, you know, turn the music off, right? Okay. And then just think of that idea and work out those notes in my head where they would be on the guitar, you know? And it's amazing how sometimes you actually can get more done without your instrument in your hand, because there's a certain distraction that goes along with just the physicality of like using your instrument, and sometimes just like using your mind to like work out where it is, and then you go sit down on the instrument, you already got it worked out, like where you know right where your fingers need to go.
I get that, because like sometimes we'll be in the car and Chelsea will look over and she'll see me like drawing in the air or something, and she's like, you're making a painting in the air again, aren't you? And I'm like working through stuff in my head, and it's like just as real.
Yeah.
It's totally real, and in a way you don't get distracted by some of the other things of like having to actually dip your brush into the paint and this and that, you know, and like sit down and get in front of the easel and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I think I forget who was talking. I think it might have been in Charles Mingus's biography where he talked about that. But I remember reading that way back when in college and being like, wow, that's cool. And then just kind of getting into it. And one of the classes I took in Santa Barbara that I always come back to, is like the most basic class. Any music department has it, and they always start you with it freshman year. It's just ear training class. And that's basically what the gist of it was. You know, it was training your ear, and we would have to sing, you know, like sight read these things, you know, it was like a lot of classical music and stuff like that. But just the process of doing that, I find it's so good for just, it's like keeping me in shape with music, you know, and having my ear be like attuned to hear everything, you know, and ready to like do it.
I also feel like there's that side of it that musicians, artists, you know, a lot of creative people take for granted, that like you don't realize how visual it actually all is. Like that feel actually comes alive for you. And I think that's so fascinating. I mean, I like to write, and I can do that with writing, but like I feel like it's so visual. I just read Jules' biography, which I know is like, but she talks about when every single time she's on stage, she sees music in like color patterns. So like as she plays, she like sees the color pattern, and if it's like not working, then she realizes, you know, she's actually visually seeing it, and that helps her balance out like her sound. But it's so fascinating because I think it might just be also that many creatives can't put that into words as eloquently as others, but I feel like it's so visual in your brain.
Yeah, like for me it is totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally feel that. It is. And playing guitar is visual.
Yeah. And I think like painting a picture is very musical, because I will listen to for instance, I'll listen to Miles or Coltrane like while I'm painting, or I'll listen to you guys or whoever. And like, especially during a guitar solo, or especially during like a really in the pocket bass, you know, part of a song, I find that like my brush strokes are going along with the music, and I'm like, it's transforming into colors, and it's like giving me the answers almost. Like sometimes it feels like it's so easy when I listen to the music that the paint answers are just like right there in front of me, and I'm like, oh god, this is so simple. Like
that's the best, when you're just channeling. Like you're just kind of guiding it along a little bit. But and again, for me, that comes back to listening. Just like if I'm really just listening to the ideas in my head, and I can just like those can just come out of me, that's like the best. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to all the time.
Yeah,
you know, like amazing. With not have an agenda.
I know. If only we could like exist there all the time, wouldn't that be?
Yeah, I know. I guess that's where we all want to be all the time.
Yes. All right. So this has been completely amazing. I mean, it's like an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh man, it's so good. I wish we can keep going on, but Chelsea has to go pick up Summer from school right now. So.
Yeah.
As we balance life, I know it goes.
Yes.
I actually got one more steel guitar track to get to this guy in the Bay Area before I leave for my sound check. So I got 2 hours to do it, which should be plenty of time.
Awesome. Okay, good. Well, I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
So if I were to drop you back in your childhood kitchen, I want to know what the first thing is that you think of.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. You want to know what the first thing I thought of was?
What?
Which is crazy. One time I set the toaster on fire because I was a little kid, and I got up before my parents on a Saturday morning. And they weren't up, you know, and I was like, I think I can go make my own toast now. And so, you know, go get some food from that. So I put in the toaster, and I guess it was set on the darkest setting or whatever. And suddenly I remember the flames rushing out, and my parents were running down the stairs, of course, put it in the fire.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
That's
it's your
my
first,
memory.
like,
I remember.
realization of trauma.
They were like happy that I didn't wake them up, but they were like, okay, let me teach you how to use the toaster now. I guess it's time you learn that.
Where did you grow up, by the way? We didn't ask you that.
That would have been in Berkeley. So I moved around a lot when I was a little kid. I was born in Washington, D.C., but by the time I was one, my folks, because my dad was in school still, so then we moved out to Pacifica, you know, which is right in the Bay Area. And then from there we moved to Berkeley. And then I think when I was about 5, we moved to Michigan for just a year. And then I moved back to the Bay Area, or actually I think it was about a year and a half. So when I was kind of 6 going on 7, right around in that area, we moved back to the Bay Area, and then I was in the Bay Area from then on until I went to college in Santa Barbara.
Wow. So of all those kitchens, the first one you thought of was the one you almost burnt down.
I did. It was the one in Berkeley, because that's kind of my earliest memories. The house in Pacifica, I have all I have is a couple sort of still shot memories, because I was so young then.
Yeah.
I kind of remember standing in the doorway of the garage, but I don't remember anything else about that house. But the one in Berkeley, that's where I remember every little corner of that house. We only lived there a couple of years, but that's that age where you're like, the memories are becoming real.
Yeah,
and when you said kitchen, first memory, I just thought I could picture the
awesome.
toaster and everything, how the old toaster was painted and everything. It was classic.
Man,
awesome.
Dude, thank you so much, Lebo.
Yeah, it's great talking to you guys. Maybe I'm still just trying to make that fire.
Yes, that's it. The full circle.
There you go.
Yeah, it's still playing out,
Yes. Well, so I want to tell everyone where we can find your tour schedule and more information on you.
Yes. So I keep my my Facebook page calendar pretty up to date. Actually, going to add a bunch of dates to that this afternoon. Some new stuff that's getting announced. And then of course the ALO webpage, we just announced our Tour de Amor, which is our big West Coast tour we do every year. So all those dates are on there, and that'll be all kind of end of January, February, March, West Coast stuff. We'll be doing a weekend at the Fillmore again, which I can't wait for.
Oh,
that's
sick.
what you guys should come out for, I have to say. Because we
great.
do, it's 2 nights. It's Friday and Saturday. And then what we do is the Saturday day, we do a kids show.
Oh,
Okay.
no
Since
way.
everything's
Is that
all
February?
set up, so
When is
people,
that?
it's great. People come out, they come to the night shows, and then they can come to the day show, and it's a whole mixture. We do some ALO original music, and also mix in some just kind of more kids music too. Like last year we played Octopus's Garden by the Beatles, things like that. And
Okay.
we dress up, and it's a super fun vibe because it's at the Fillmore, so all the chandeliers are there, and there's kids running around like crazy. We have, it's really fun. And that's kind of the big point of the Tour de Amor. That's kind of that weekend is usually the big point of it. So.
Okay.
So earlier we talked about manifesting. Can I put you on the spot on a podcast here that I would love to live paint with you guys sometime?
Yes, let's do that. That sounds awesome.
Okay.
And Estelle has to babysit if we come out, so tell her to get ready.
Exactly. Yeah, she loves kids.
Oh man, awesome.
Awesome. I love that. Let's make that happen.
Yes. Awesome. Well, we will talk to you soon.
See you in Asbury
Great.
Park, I hope, Lebo.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be seeing you in a couple days. Let's stay in touch on that.
Awesome.
That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you so much, man.
Okay, see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening, guys. We appreciate you. If you like what we're doing, could we ask you to go to iTunes and leave us a nice review and rating? It really helps us and helps other people to know that we're providing a good podcast for you. If you'd like to find us on social media, you can find us at Shifting Perceptions Podcast. You can find my artwork at jalders.com or me on social media at jalders. You can find my beautiful wife Chelsea on ommamasdoulas.com or on social media at ommamasdoulas. And if you'd like to join our newsletter or find episodes online with show notes, you can go to shiftingperceptionspodcast.com. Until next week, talk to you then. See you guys. Thanks so much.